So good morning, afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. 2019 results are in, and appreciate you joining us today. My name is Caroline Seymour, and I head up the product marketing here at Zerto. And before we start, I just want housekeeping items quickly, that if you have any questions, please type the questions on the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we shall definitely be answering those towards the end. I've got a couple of folks on my team too that will answer those questions as we go through, but I'll read them out towards the Q&A so everybody can hear the questions. So as we look at, let me just, sorry about that. So what we're going to be doing today is to talk about the 2019 State of IT Resilience and the results. And the official name of the report that we're going to be talking about is called the IDC Worldwide Business Resilience Readiness Thought Leadership. And this report is the second one that we've done. So this is the second year in a row that IDC has conducted a worldwide survey of business and IT decision makers that's sponsored by Zerto and was designed to really develop a more concrete understanding of the variables that really determine IT resilience. Now, the survey really explored current disaster recovery preparedness of companies, what the future needs and perceptions of what business disruption is, digital transformation, and IT resilience as a whole. And I'm going to be sharing a number of these results with you, and you will be able to download the report to get a full detail of the report and the results after the webinar. Now, this survey is the result of 500 respondents global, who were really senior level IT and business managers. And these respondents indicated that they were very familiar with or were directly involved in business data protection, disaster recovery, business continuity, and also cloud computing strategies within their organization. And so they were selected to complete this survey itself. Now, the 500 respondents that are represented as part of this survey represent over 10 unique industries overall. Now, the top industries were IT, manufacturing, professional services, financial services, and construction as well. Now, of the respondents, 60% were based in North America, 20% in Europe, and 20% in Asia. And regarding the company size, about 58% of respondents represented organizations of about 1,000 to 5,000 employees. And 27% represented organizations that were greater than 5,000, between 5 and 10,000. And then about 14% represented organizations with about 10,000. So there's a good spread of organizations of sort of medium to large scale enterprises represented in this survey. And so in this webinar, I'm really going to focus on three key areas. First, around the disruption to business, disaster recovery and backup, and the role of cloud. There is much more in the report too, but I really wanted to focus and hone in on these key aspects. And rather than me just walking through all of the results, I invited Jamie Williams of Tencate Protective Fabrics to join us, and he's kindly agreed to share how he's actually solving for each of these focus areas around disruption to his business, disaster recovery and backup, and the role of cloud. And we're going to go, and as we go through the presentation, he will actually share what they are doing within Tencate Protective Fabrics. Now, I always personally think that it's better to hear from a customer than just a vendor. So I'm really excited that Jamie, you're here to join us. And he is a systems engineer, senior systems engineer with Tencate Protective Fabrics. And Jamie's been working at Tencate for over 13 years now, but has an overall experience of 30 years in IT. And we were talking the other day, and he said he's lived through the DOS, the Windows for Workgroups, Y2K, P2V, and cloud, and also crypto locker. And actually, we're going to be talking quite a bit about ransomware today. And you also, Jamie, spent 8 years in the US Marine Corps, and I think you'd do it all again, wouldn't you, Jamie? So, Jamie, it's a pleasure working with you, and welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and look forward to sharing some of the things that I've gone through and learned.
Yeah, and I thought what we could do, Jamie, is first of all, maybe if you could share with the audience, with the attendees today, who Tencate Protective Fabrics are, and a little bit about the organization.
Absolutely. So we are a textile-based company. Our home office is in Holland. So we are Dutch-based, but each business unit has its own corporate or main primary office. And I work out of Atlanta, you may tell from my accent. But this company is around 300 years old, so it's been around a long time, and it's a global company. And I shared some of the marketing material down here. So if anyone is a fan of The Walking Dead, as a couple of those slides show, our facilities, 2 of our facilities are right down the street from Alexandria, which happens to be right across the road from the old Woodbury. So we have marketed stuff specifically to that. We are in the military, we are in first responders, artificial turf, composites. We even have material on the Mars lander sitting on Mars right now.
Thank you, Jamie. That's great. So that was really interesting, particularly about the Walking Dead. So that's very interesting there. So let's first talk about the cost of disruption to a business. And IDC has determined that really the average cost, of downtime is about $250,000 per hour across all industries and organizational sizes. And of course, this number can vary widely and can extend up to sort of millions of dollars per hour, for very large financial institutions and other institutions too. But, for the purpose of this exercise, we used this as an average. And when you start to sort of look at it, if the fact that you have downtime, say for a day, and this downtime would include things like, the direct and indirect costs associated to lost revenue or lost productivity, it would cost an organization about $2 million a day. And so the long-term impact on an organization's corporate reputation and customer goodwill may add significantly to this total over time. And actually, I was reading a Forbes article only last week where it was reported that, for example, Atlantic City, and I think it was Florida City, has spent over $17 million or more to recover from ransomware. And I'm sure we've all read stories like that. And these attacks are going to continue. And so let's take a further look at the report itself. And as we look at the survey report, what you're seeing here are some of the key 2019 headlines, because as I say, this was the second year that we ran this. And out of the 500 respondents, 91% have experienced a tech-related business disruption in the past 2 years. And, the bottom line here is the fact that data disruption happens, and the negative impact around that can be significant. And so when you look deeper into some of the numbers here, of those respondents who experience a tech-related disruption, 18% categorize the disruption as severe. And the scale of choice that we had was no impact to severe. So the impact of these disruptions varied quite considerably when you look at sort of with employee overtime and the direct cost to recover. So things like hiring consultants or specialists being really the most common consequences. Now, even worse was about 28% of respondents experienced major reputational damage, while 26% of the respondents experienced permanent loss of customers as a result of business disruptions. So those are the significant numbers. And then again, 91% have experienced some kind of business disruption. And again, there are some variety of factors which we'll talk about. And if you look at last year's survey, and those of you who may have read the report, this figure has actually increased from 84%, so now to 91%. So this really suggests that business disruptions are more common. And further complicating matters too is the fact that businesses face a whole range of disruptive factors beyond just disasters now. Many disruptions are caused, say, by new technologies, new products or services, disruptive competitors, or new business models. And now certainly many of these types of disruptive events or technologies will be related to IT and digital transformation initiatives as enterprises really look to outpace their competition or avoid falling behind. And then the last two that you actually see here, so 84% have experienced a malicious attack in the past 12 months, at least what they know about. And I'm going to delve a little bit more into this one too, as well as also the 56% that have experienced unrecoverable data within the last 3 years. And this is actually up 49% over last year. That's significant when you think about unrecoverable data. So let's just drill in somewhat into the ransomware and malicious attacks. And so as you look here, 84% have experienced a malicious attack attempt in the past year that they know about, as we said. And when you look at that, it's over 50% are 25 or more. So it's quite frightening to see some of the numbers as you look here of 1 to 24, 25 to 49, 50 and up, and so forth. So it's a significant number of attacks that we're seeing throughout these 500 respondents. And then we've asked the follow-up question is the fact that during the past 12 months, how many successful malicious attacks of all types has your organization suffered? And so you can see here the numbers go 1 to 9, 10 to 24, 25 to 49. And, you know, there's 47% are over 10 or more that resulted, you know, that is significant and has resulted in having to have some level of recovery time. And then if we take a further look at the number of attacks, we asked about during the past 12 months how many malicious attacks have actually resulted in data corruption. So when you look at that, there's 93% of attacks have resulted in some form of data corruption or data loss. And thinking about malware or ransomware, phishing, hacking attacks, this will continue. And it's going to be a constant challenge as companies are looking at building out a digital business. And so as every organization, you know, increases its reliance on data, so you think about the data gathering or data analysis that you use to inform, you know, real-time and future-looking business decisions, this data is becoming increasingly lucrative for attackers to actually target. And then if we take a look at the next question that we asked is that during the past 3 years, we changed the question a bit to here, is has your organization experienced any kind of events that resulted in unrecoverable data? So this is not just caused by ransomware, and as you can see, 56% said yes, they have. And then when you actually look at the survey results here about top reasons, the top reasons leading to unrecoverable data. And when you look at these actual results themselves, this would actually indicate that many of the unrecoverable data events were the result of avoidable causes, because there are things like data loss associated to the gap between backups, backup and recovery system failure, lost and damaged tapes. And of course, there's always that human error. But I've highlighted here the three that I think really show that these could be avoidable in today's solutions that are available to address backup and disaster recovery. And since we've been talking about ransomware and disruptions to the business, well, I was talking to Jamie, and what we thought we'd do is just share interesting situations that you had, Jamie, before you had Zerto, and then after Zerto as well, with regards to a ransomware attack.
Absolutely. So in the traditional setup, prior to any malicious attack with that type of incident really not on our radar at all, we were moving forward status quo with the standard backup to tape with someone that we anointed as the tape changer at each of our remote sites, because they are about an hour's drive or so away from where we sit at the corporate office. We asked them to change out the DLT tapes, back up the tape using a traditional product. And again, this was in the physical, just going into the virtual world, just touching the virtual world. These backups, as we all know from those days, you set them to run and you sat and wait and you hope it made it overnight. Sometimes it did not. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't run at all. When we were hit with the first incident, we were backing up the tape and had also moved on to backing up to a backup appliance. So we thought, hey, we're double good now. We got tape, we got someone we can count on, and we're backing up to a disk appliance. When we were hit and became aware of what was going on with CryptoLocker at this location, we discovered we lost about 12 hours worth of data because of the backup window, which I believe is the 59% top line avoidable item on the previous information we were learning from you. This affected an entire file server. So at our locations, that's where all of the data we keep for that location and to share out to the corporate office on one file server, and it took that whole thing down. So learning what was going on, reacting to what was going on, understanding what was going on, the 12-hour gap, it was in an entire VM, pretty large VM. Time to recover was painful. We had teams from all over, members driving and meeting down at this location, setting up like a war room, sitting around the table, and literally we had to rebuild this file server from scratch, and it was about a 2-week process of going through, figuring out what we do, how do we move forward, communicating this to the folks at the plant, the manager, getting feedback for them. So it was a slow, painful realization of that top line avoidable item that we just learned about. After that, we learned our lesson. We figured we have got to do something to make this better. This is unacceptable. We took a hit to our reputation as a service provider to these entities as well. So we started asking around our trusted partners, what's out there, what can we do, what do we go to from this? Obviously, this did not work. What's our next steps we can go to? That led us down the road to Zerto. Then we began going from backup to tape, backup to disk, to continuous protection. We started replicating from these remote sites up to our data center, our primary data center. So think, okay, we can check that box. I understand. I know I've got some protection. Our RPO, you can see, is obvious when you use and look at Zerto. There's no comparison between an old-timey backup to tape, even backup to disk, and the amount of time between each recovery point in Zerto. It's uncomparable. I mean, literally, we got hit a second time, and we went through this same process. And when we recovered, we caught it sooner, back up to the entire file server. The second time, we caught it sooner. It only affected a number of directories within another file server. And we gathered around at my desk and decided which checkpoint are we going to fall back to. And we were actually making jokes. It wasn't a feeling of dread. It wasn't a feeling of, do I need to update my resume? It was, I've got this new tool, and this was the first time that we had been called upon to use it and confidently said, how many seconds do we want to go back to? We were literally making jokes and in hindsight, looking back at what we had dealt with and gone through the first time, saying there is no comparison. You know, I feel confident, comfortable. I know what's going to happen. And we literally fell back to 10 seconds before we found the indication and recovered, and we're back in business. Of course, we've got to go back and mitigate. And since these two, we've learned lessons and have not had another incident like this because of other precautions and other things, reaching out to partners and asking them, what can we do to stop this? But 2 weeks, literally data loss. The first two things that you touched on happened to us, a hit to our reputation, to 10 seconds with 10 seconds of data loss, which the data loss here, this was at another office, is not changing that rapidly. So I doubt if anyone even knew what the heck was going on when we recovered the second time.
That's a great story, Jamie, and you must feel so much better having to sort of feel the confidence and that you're protected today
Absolutely.
from any future attacks. And I know you've got some key learnings that I put on here for you to share. I think they're really interesting for the audience.
Yes. So there's always something to take from these lessons, good, bad, and different. There's always something that we can learn and we can take and we can make things better and come back and share with other people as well. So for the first thing is we need to always be educating ourselves. I feel like, at least with me, that a lot of times you fall into your set bubble of how things go. This is SOP, everything's green, check, check, check. And we become complacent. We need to be educating ourselves as administrators and also finding resources, tools, means, and ways to educate users, which is one of the things that we brought out of that second attack, is engaging external companies that do active phishing into the network and teach people this is what a phishing email looks like that could have a payload, and educating not only ourselves, but our users to help our environment stay safe holistically. Never think your organization is impenetrable. This came from our feeling that of all the corporations out there, why in the world would someone target Tencate? They probably don't know we exist. This isn't something we need to concern ourselves about. But this happened. These two happen to be flyby scenarios. They weren't targeted. They were not someone trying to actively come in, but they were flyby scenarios. So thinking you're impenetrable is just wrong. It's a fallacy. You should not think I'm a small fish in a big ocean. No one wants my data. That's just incorrect thinking. This should be obvious to everyone, but testing recovery plan and proving not only to the business and the people you're providing the services to, but yourself and your team for confidence. It seems obvious, but again, a lot of us get in that SOP. Everything's green. I'm good to go. I'll test tomorrow. I'll test next week. That's one of the features I really like about Zerto is the reminder, where it can tell you instead of your boss saying, when's the last time we tested? I don't know. I need to go look that up. Well, I've got a reminder in Zerto that says it's time to test, and getting the team and other people confident in the process and seeing it work. That's an obvious one, but it is a takeaway. Multiple people comfortable with the process. So I don't think people who are acting maliciously and trying to gain access to your data schedules their attacks around when certain people are in or out of the office. So the one guy that you chose or two that you chose to be in charge of recovery may be on vacation, they may be at Ignite, they may be at reInvent, they may be at ZertoCon. You need multiple people who are not only know how, but are comfortable and confident in recovering the data. And with the Zerto, they need to be able to click 3 times. And if they go through the tests, no matter what you set the reminders at, 6 months, 3 months, every month, then the comfort and the confidence in being able to recover the data is 3 clicks away. Third-party expertise is something that I rely on, and I'm not talking about just Google. I'm talking about personal relationships with trusted partners who have helped other partners and other clients that can share that data and say, this is a good solution, this is a bad solution, this worked for these guys, that works for these, this doesn't work, we no longer recommend. I mean, that's information that you cannot get any other way than through direct personal relationships with people that you build trust and confidence in to help guide you. We can Google all you want, but calling a person that you trust and them saying yay or nay, to me, I'll take that more than I would, the top 10 results in a Google result. I trust the people that I trust to help me. Change is good. This is, at least for me, this was not difficult to realize, but difficult to implement, because when you're moving to different platforms and things, for me at least, you seem to want to defend the way you used to do it, even if the way you used to do it is archaic, old, and no longer applicable. So we as administrators have got to be open to changing, willing to say, admit that there is a better way. I can do this a better way. I may need help. I need to go back to those third-party expertise, but there could be a better way to do this, and be open and willing to implement that.
Thank you, Jamie, and appreciate you sharing the experience prior to having Zerto and post Zerto too, and the key learnings that you've taken away from your expertise. And I hope that the audience found that valuable too, because I'm sure this is on top of mind for everybody. It was funny, actually, I was just, one of my team shared with me an article that was actually yesterday, and a new strain of ransomware is megacortex. So as I mentioned before, I think this is something that is going to be a constant challenge. And with the explosion of data, I mean, we've got to be careful and be prepared. And I think you've got a great example here of what you've done and how you're resolving for ransomware. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So if we take a sort of a further look at some of the survey questions and the results, because one of the questions that we asked is, what are the biggest challenges with respect to disaster recovery? And so, when you think about addressing these challenges that you see here, so data transfer, the migration costs, recovery orchestration, and so forth. These are all things that I think are considered for, as a first step for any sort of IT resilience plan. And, if you think about some of the modern backup and DR solutions, they now include, for example, management, orchestration, built-in orchestration, and automation capabilities that you need to be able to do and address these recovery challenges. And of course, Zerto is one of them too. And so I just wanted to also share some of the rest of the results. I highlighted the key ones, the top 5, but it was interesting because it was something also, Jamie, you mentioned about testing, and that's considered one of the big challenges too. 28% of folks said that testing is one of the recovery challenges, and you get prompted when to do a testing, and it's very easy with Zerto to set that up and also provide the full reports you need to be able to provide in compliance with your auditing and so forth. So I just wanted to mention that one too. So what was also, well, one item or one question that we had that was new to the survey was the question about what are your organization's biggest challenges regarding backup and recovery. And here I've just picked up this sort of the top four, and not too much of a surprise really, in as much as the restore reliability, cost, backup reliability. We hear these time and time again. And you have to think about the resources, the personal training, because we hear time and time again the sort of the complexity of the tools that you have and training to manage these tools itself. But just to sort of share with you the rest of the results that you can actually see here as well. So one of the things that we've seen here at Zerto is the fact that we've seen more and more customers have been using Zerto, so our continuous data protection, for solving, more of the traditional backup use cases. We've heard from Jamie, for example, with regard to ransomware and how he's solving ransomware challenges with Zerto. We also see, for example, the use of Zerto in the case of a file being deleted. Because if you think about it, if you've got a file that was, say, deleted half an hour ago, and based on what time it is your last backup, you could have a gap and you could lose that amount of data based on that backup window that you actually had. Versus if you're using, for example, continuous data protection with the replication and journaling technology that we have, you can actually recover to within seconds of the attack. And Jamie, a moment ago, also shared how he recovered to less than 10 seconds. So we're seeing more and more of our customers using Zerto to solve for backup use cases. And actually now we've added in the capabilities to support long-term retention, so beyond the 30-day journaling for fast recovery up to 30 days. But you have compliance needs that typically that you would actually require for certain compliance requirements or other needs that you need to save data for months or years. So absolutely, disaster recovery and backup are converging. And we believe that, continuous data protection and journaling technology is the future for converged DR and backup. So, and this was sort of interesting too. It's one of the questions that we asked in the survey this year was how likely are you to pursue a convergence of backup and DR tools and eliminate redundant tools within the next 24 months. And it was interesting that over 90%, or 93.4%, said that they were likely to pursue a convergence of backup and DR tools while eliminating redundant tools. And so this really indicates that, users are increasingly seeing backup and DR functions as complementary assets of a single solution, so not separate and siloed products. And this is something, again, that Jamie, we've been talking about and you've been looking at from a Tencate perspective. And would you care to share your views and where you've come from to and where you're going a little bit with the audience?
Yes. So this really hits home for me because we just finished having this discussion here 2 weeks ago. And not only having the discussion, but made the choice and licensed ourselves with Zerto to make this journey. So we, again, came from the traditional world. We had LTO tape backup all over the place. We had 24 tape library at primary location. We had service coming in every 2 times a week, taking tapes off-prem. It was the traditional, I've got myself covered, so you think in the back of your mind setup. And we thought we were comfortable with that until it proved itself in the examples I gave earlier. It was not reliable for us. So from that world, when we started into virtualization. Of course, they struggled. All of those existing applications struggled to meet the needs of virtual environments. And when we started virtualizing, we made a plan and actively went out to plant locations and P2V'd every single thing that was possible at that time and jumped in. I mean, we're done with physical and those solutions. We're struggling and trying bolt-on products and things to be able to back up and provide some sort of comfort into the virtual world. And that led us to the second, to Veeam and Zerto. Veeam was doing our long-term retention to exagrids, and then exagrids are replicating that to other sites. Zerto was we need this ASAP tier 0 applications, never down, always covered. So we mentally and logically split those between that divide. Here's our long-term to disk. Tapes are gone. We threw out the tape library. We had a tape burning party, got rid of all of that stuff, got rid of the service. We're done with it. Now we're using 2 products. From there, again, like I just said, as of 2 weeks ago, we are now actively going down the LTR road with Zerto, targeting, again, our exagrids is a purpose-built backup appliance for LTR out of Zerto. And this is all hinged on the discussions we had with our director of IT in Holland and the manager here, that our 2-year plan is to go to 1 product for all this, just like your previous slide showed. And that 1 product is the tile on the right-hand side called Zerto. So we are actively pursuing and going down the road that you just showed us that over 90% of organizations want to get to. It seems natural, seems obvious. We are going to lower our costs, and we're going to have one tool to do LTR, 1 tool to do resilience. And that same tool, by the way, is also where our service desk goes to for granular file recoveries now. So they're already trained. The time it took to get service desk trained on go to this portal to recover a file was literally about a couple of hours. Putting a shortcut on a browser to remember where to go to is the most difficult part. After that, walking them through it is literally a couple of hours. I've also taken the opportunity to bring many of these guys to ZertoCon. So in the few days that you're at ZertoCon, there's so much information that people who are unfamiliar with the product can become familiar with, to go to virtual labs, learn with no consequences that they think they're going to destroy something. That's a no-brainer as well. So that's led us through these tiles from the old-timey back up to tape, managing multiple products, and now collapsing down to 1 product that spans across that entire horizon: LTR, granular backup, and resiliency, all in 1 package.
Thanks, Jamie, and I love what you said about the tape burning party. I thought that was great. But there were a couple of things you mentioned in there. I just want to, for those of the audience who maybe don't know, in the fact that we did launch Zerto 7.0 back in April, and that's where we added support for long-term retention policies, secondary targets. And I think you mentioned, Jamie, that you're using exagrid, so it could be exagrid, it could be HP Store 1, so it could be any other secondary storage. So, and that means effectively that you can recover from whether it's seconds ago or whether it's from years. So with 7 year, we used to call it the 777. So there's 7 seconds to 7 years, but it could be 77 years, or it could be 700 years. It could be whatever you actually need to keep your data. The other thing you mentioned was ZertoCon, and for those of you on the call, that ZertoCon is our user conference that we hold once a year. But it did prompt me actually, because we're running some ZertoCon locals starting in about October timeframe, where we're going to be going around different cities in North America and also Europe too, and we will be there sharing the latest updates that we have and covering various different topics that we're certainly covering here, but in more detail. So I just wanted to mention that, but thanks again, Jamie, on that one. And so what I wanted to do in the last segment here is really sort of take a look at the role of cloud. And as you can see here, the use of public cloud for, disaster recovery and data protection. And, when you look at it, cloud continues, to be viewed as an opportunity in a DR plan and strategy, because there are today 45.5% respondents so that they're using public cloud for data protection and disaster recovery, and that's going to continue to grow so that companies can really leverage their on-demand compute and the storage and so forth. And then the interesting one here too, and I added this one in, was what percentage of your applications are fully covered by a DR strategy. And I'd say there's a lot of opportunity here to think about a cloud DR and data protection strategy for all the apps that are not protected, because over 50% of applications, when we look for the respondents, are not covered by DR strategy. So there's a lot of opportunity to improve here and reduce that systemic risk that this potentially has for an organization. And when you take a look at the protection strategy around public cloud, and there are many options, and they include, whether it's private cloud in-house or public or DR as a service. And really, to be honest, it depends on your needs. And if you look at the Forrester Wave for disaster recovery as a service, or the Magic Quadrant for disaster recovery as a service, you will find that 10 of the 11 in the Magic Quadrant, the service providers, actually use Zerto as the underlying technology as their disaster recovery. And in the Forrester Wave, 100% of the service providers there. But we have over 400 cloud service providers now that we can provide, if that is an option versus doing it in-house. And so what I thought is, I know that you've been on a journey to cloud for some time now, Jamie, and I know that you started out at AWS and now you're moving to Azure, and if we just go here, if you want to share your story of your cloud journey with the audience.
Okay, our like you said, our first initiative was in AWS. The reason why we went to AWS at that time is quite literally, I called Zerto and said, I know you guys are working with these different public cloud providers, and again, this is at knowledge zero for us. If I were to ask you who to choose, who would you advise me to choose? And I was told that in about 2 weeks we were going to start supporting replication to AWS. So boom, then my choice was made right there from another trusted provider, calling them up and giving me some useful information. So we went down the AWS route, and we racked up a pretty good bill. I mean, we were running EC2 instances. We were doing a lot of stuff in AWS. As the business evolved, again, going back to change and adapting and putting change into practice, we went to Office 365. Office 365 makes it very easy and appealing to use Azure. So we became a on-prem data center, an AWS consumer, an Office 365 consumer, as well as a Azure consumer. and we had tenants around the world. So we were in Singapore, Europe, the Americas. We were all over the world. That changed when we were split from a regional support group to a global support group by business entity. So protective fabrics is one business entity, composites another, artificial turf another. So the way I like to think of it or explain it is we went from columns of support to rows of support stretching around the world. And we communicated with each other when we were regional, helped each other set up and maintain services for each other. But this was a fundamental shift, and that led us to what we're looking at now. Is we still have our primary data center here in Atlanta, supporting the remote sites in the Americas as well as in Europe. We have services again running in the Americas, but we also have some VMs and services running in a private cloud, an IaaS solution in Enschede in Holland. Plus, we are still all in Office 365. We migrated everyone's data services from the global to company-specific O365. And again, we are consuming Azure services. And that started off as a replication point for Zerto, but has proven itself to be useful in these services we see here. So we used to maintain, like everyone, SharePoint farm and Exchange farm, all of that stuff on-prem. We've taken advantage of not having to run updates and maintain all of that stuff and shifted to SharePoint Online. We take advantage of SSO services in Azure, is also the key stores in Azure. So SSO is really convenient for end users when one password gets them into the things that they need without having to remember this for this application, another for another application. They're really receptive and thankful. They may not care or understand what this is, but when you say one password, one username, they're really thankful for that service and keeping it secure with the services that Azure offers. Azure File Sync, we did use the Amazon solution. It worked really well, the storage gateway. So it seemed natural when they came out with Azure File Sync not too terribly long ago to start trying that out and possibly going to a content delivery network for file shares or shift that all up to SharePoint Online. But these are services we're actively using, some of them. Intune was obvious. So that became our MDM platform for laptops, mobile devices, any of your bring your own device is managed by Intune as well as corporate owned stuff. Not only for some self-imposed compliancy, but also just so that we can push apps, we can offer apps, services like Windows Hello is easy managed through Intune. Azure VMs, we do have some Azure VMs running, domain controllers, other services running Azure. They're active, they're hot, and of course we target Azure for our Zerto environment as well. Azure AD, we use Azure AD Premium. That's what grants you access to some of these other services in Intune and Windows Hello and whatnot. That's a really easy, when we're running in hybrid mode, it's a really easy service to take advantage of and advantageous. Conditional access is a really nice and rule-driven way of controlling when, how, who can access what at what time and from what location. That is again, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but not as difficult as say, I don't know, configuring a PIX back in the day. This is a really neat and way to, again, maintain some compliance and some fundamental who has access to what and how. So SQL databases, our DBA is taking advantage of running SQL as a service as well. Some of the things that we've learned when going through these journeys to the cloud, never back yourself or your company into a position that you have no exit strategy from. When we went into AWS, we thought this was the end all be all. Nobody can compete, nobody can offer, and they all have great services. They all have different offerings, but always keep in the back of your mind that somebody out there is going to do something better, and I don't want to be sitting in a place captive and unable to move and take advantage of these other services that are coming out. In technology, we all know these things are changing by the hour or by the minute sometimes. Even this is available, this service is now available, this service is in preview. But being able to take advantage of those things because I'm not pinned to one provider is something to keep in the back of your mind. I need an exit strategy. I need a means and ways, a tool that'll help me port my data from this provider to another one if necessary. Talk to your solution providers. If they've got a good working relationship with a private cloud provider, or they've done work in the public cloud, take advantage of that information. Why reinvent the wheel? Why try and do something that they've already done and can come in and half the time and help you implement? That's something too mentally that you have to say, I need help with this, and being able to recognize that early and get the project accomplished, completed, and in production, I think is just as important as saying, I'm going to do this all by myself and prove I can do it. Get it in production, get trained on it, learn how to use it, but reach out to these folks that have already done it, which leads into being willing to adapt and change. Like I said earlier, these offerings are changing by the hour. We can stay in touch with our solution providers. We can watch for the announcements, go and look and be willing. Don't be closed-minded to say that'll never work for us or that has no place here. And I don't mean go look for a solution looking for a problem. Just say, can some of these offerings help the business? You know, will this help the bottom line? Will this make processes easier for end users? Continued learning. We can't sit here and say, I know it all. I know everything. It's changing so rapidly. There's no way anyone in IT can know everything about everything. We need help. And that's how we can reach out to each other, reach out to our providers, reach out to our friends that we have relationships with, and say, can you teach me that? Can you show me that? You know, I'll do the same. Being a European company and dealing with business worldwide, of course, GDPR comes into play. One thing that I learned that I didn't realize is if a cloud provider itself is GDPR compliant or any other compliance that you may need, if you move your services into their infrastructure, they in turn can provide you, the business, with those certifications to pass on to whoever is asking you to provide the certification for your business. By default, if I'm using their infrastructure and they are certified in whatever, ISO, whatever you need, that in turn is enough for us to hand off and say, this is the certification for this compliance. We are compliant because we're using these services provided by a cloud provider, which is. So that makes it a little bit easier rather than having a whole a lot of security officers trying to figure out what do we need to do, how do we remain compliant, how do we become compliant, whatever the case may be. These providers can help us with that.
Thank you, Jamie. That's great. And I was just looking at the time. So what I'd like to do is really sort of conclude here, because we've talked about the three key areas that we started with. So disruption to the business, disaster recovery and backup, and the role of cloud. And Jamie shared his experience in each of these sort of key focus areas. But if you look at the sort of the conclusions around the survey, just to sort of give you a sort of a summary, and as I mentioned, you can download the report, or we'll be sending out the report post the event too. And so first is, you know, at the end of the day, IT and business disruptions are frequent, and they're going to happen. And in fact, you know, they continue to happen. We saw that with 91% of tech-related disruptions, 91% of business-related disruptions from the respondents that to the survey. And so the second thing too is that it is recognition as you look at the results and as you read the report that, you know, IT and you on the phone too largely recognize a lot of the problems, and you're working to address them and getting to where you need to be to provide the right data protection for your organization. And I think this number 3 is a significant one to me. Is as we looked at sort of the results and looked at you know, the top causes of unrecoverable data, and seen that most of those are completely avoidable, with the right technology. So there's a lot that can be done to address the top causes of recovering data, or unrecoverable data, I should say. And what we're seeing, and you'll see in the survey too, is the fact that the vast majority of organizations are planning to continue to put on their data protection and DR, and we're seeing that in a lot of as part of their sort of digital transformation or IT transformation projects, and it's a critical aspect. We're seeing that data protection plays its role as companies are transforming and building the digital business. And the last one too is around cloud, and we saw today that, you know, 45% of the respondents are using public cloud, and that, you know, at the end of the day, DR cloud plays a significant role in DR for nearly every organization. I apologize, I skipped over that slide by mistake, but there is stats in there that she shows that really every organization that responded has some strategy in place over the next few years to incorporate cloud as part of their DR strategy. And so with that, I just want to sort of summarize and remind people in the fact that, you know, what Zerto delivers to an organization. We have one platform, one IT resilience platform that provides the following capabilities of disaster recovery, so our replication and our journaling technology, and we've extended that to provide support for the traditional backup use cases, now extending that, going to years. We also provide the ability for you to go to the cloud from a multi-cloud hybrid cloud, and what that means is that you can go to the cloud, from the cloud, and also between clouds. And it was interesting, Jamie talked about the fact of having an exit strategy, the ability, because what is right today may not be where you want to be tomorrow, and you may change or decide to have multiple clouds. And we are seeing most companies have a multi-cloud strategy, so you have that level of flexibility. And then migration. You may be migrating across hypervisors or to the cloud or whatever it happens to be. So we provide migration capabilities to support those particular strategies. And we have built-in orchestration and automation that we've included within the product to automate those manual workflows, whether that's through a migration process, moving to cloud, or to your disaster recovery and backup. And then lastly, our analytics that provides that insight. I always think of it as sort of you can analyze the past and monitor the present and plan for the future. So you can look at the past, the present, and the future with analytics across your multi-site, multi-cloud environment. And I've just put here some of the use cases that we have our customers using Zerto for today, and we've talked a lot about the outages, disruptions, ransomware, but really now the complete data protection too. So with that, and I know, and I apologize, we have come up to the hour, and there are a couple of questions. One is what cloud support that we provide. I know Jamie talked about Azure. We do support AWS and also IBM Cloud. And a couple of people did ask about the presentation and the report. And as I mentioned, the report we will be sending out to everybody on the webinar, and the presentation will be available as well. So I apologize for running a bit late, but we'll look at the other questions and get back to folks. And with that, what I'll do is say thank you. Thank you to Jamie for sharing your experiences and as we've gone through the three key focus areas. So thank you very much, Jamie.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for attending. And with that, I'll end the webinar.